What if the man the world looked down on was the only one who could give a child the love he had been missing his whole life? Isabella, a powerful CEO, begged a janitor to pretend to be her son's father for just 1 hour. But the janitor had one shocking condition, a condition that would change everything. That night, as he held her son's hand in front of the world, whispers began to spread. The truth she had buried for years started clawing its way back, and just when her heart began to open, a face from her past arrived to tear it all apart. A battle between wealth and love, lies and truth, legacy and family, until Isabella was forced to make the most important choice of her life. And that choice would decide not only her son's future, but her own. Now let's dive in the story. The night wrapped itself around the city like a velvet curtain, but the towers of Carter Industries still glowed with an almost defiant brilliance. The skyscraper rose proudly against the skyline, its glass facade catching the faint reflections of streetlights and the occasional passing car. Inside the grand marble lobby, silence pressed against the walls, broken only by the soft rhythm of a mop sweeping gracefully across the polished floor. Ethan moved with practiced ease, his tall frame bending slightly as he guided the mop along each corner, the faint scent of disinfectant mingling with the lingering perfume of executives who had left hours earlier. For most, this space was a cathedral of wealth and ambition, but for Ethan, it was simply another shift, another night of work that would be forgotten by morning. He paused for a moment, leaning on the wooden handle, his calloused hands roughened by years of unseen labor. His gaze drifted upward to the chandelier, its crystals scattering light in tiny prisms. Sometimes, when the building was empty and still, he allowed himself to imagine what it would be like to belong here, not as a shadow sweeping up the remnants of others' days, but as someone whose footsteps mattered. He shook the thought away quickly, returning to his work, his steady motions creating a quiet rhythm that filled the otherwise hollow air. The sound of heels striking marble disrupted the stillness. Ethan looked up, surprised. At this hour, the building should have been empty, its powerful inhabitants long gone to their lavish homes. But there she was, Isabella Carter, the CEO herself, stepping into the lobby. Her presence was always commanding, her posture tall and precise, her expression unreadable to most. Tonight, however, something about her seemed different. The aura of authority clung to her, yes, but it wavered, like a candle flickering in the wind. Isabella stopped just a few feet away from him. For a long, tense moment she said nothing. Her eyes, usually sharp and decisive, were clouded with an emotion Ethan rarely saw in her. Hesitation. He straightened slowly, unsure whether he should step aside or offer a polite nod. Before he could decide, her voice cut through the silence, softer than he had ever heard it. "Ethan, I need a favor." He blinked, the mop pausing mid-sweep. A favor? From him? The CEO of one of the most powerful companies in the city was asking something of the janitor who scrubbed her floors? The thought itself felt absurd, yet the tremor in her voice told him this was no casual request. He stayed quiet, his dark eyes fixed on her, waiting for her to continue. She drew in a breath, her shoulders tightening as though bracing herself. "For just 1 hour," she whispered, "I want you to pretend to be a father." The words seemed to hang in the air, echoing in the vast emptiness of the lobby. Ethan's brows furrowed, his mind scrambling to catch up. Pretend to be a father? Had he heard her correctly? His first instinct was disbelief, and his silence stretched until it became almost uncomfortable. Isabella's composure faltered. Her gaze fell to the floor before lifting again, and this time her eyes carried a plea. "My son is waiting upstairs for a school event. He was promised his dad would come." Her voice cracked faintly, a break in the armor she wore so carefully. "He's never had a father figure, Ethan. Tonight, he needs one. And I don't trust anyone else to do this." Ethan felt a weight settle on his chest. He had seen Isabella pass through this lobby countless times, had heard her commanding tone, watched her sweep past employees who scurried to meet her demands. To see her standing before him now, not as a titan of industry but as a mother with desperation in her eyes, unsettled him deeply. He gripped the mop handle tighter, his thoughts a storm of questions. Why him? Why now? What would happen if he said yes or no? For several heartbeats, he remained frozen, caught between incredulity and compassion. He imagined a boy upstairs, waiting eagerly, heart fragile, hope clinging to a promise that might break before the night was over. The image tugged at something in him, something buried but not forgotten. At last he lowered the mop, leaning it gently against the wall. His voice, when it came, was steady, calm, yet carried a gravity that made Isabella's breath hitch. "I'll do it," he said slowly, "but only if you promise me one thing." The faint relief that had begun to soften Isabella's face froze instantly. Her eyes widened, caught off guard. She had expected hesitation, perhaps even refusal, but not this. Conditions from the janitor she had thought she held all authority over. A quiet tension filled the space between them, the weight of his words pressing heavier than any mop or bucket ever could. Isabella's lips parted, her usual confidence faltering once more. The marble walls seemed to close in around them, the air thick with unspoken truths. What could he possibly demand in exchange for such a request? She found herself searching his face for answers, but his expression gave nothing away. The silence deepened, broken only by the faint hum of the building's night systems. Ethan's steady gaze held hers, firm and unwavering, until it was she, the all-powerful CEO, who finally asked the question. Her voice came out quieter than she intended, almost fragile. "What condition?" And in that suspended moment, with the city lights blazing beyond the glass walls, and a boy upstairs still waiting for a father, Isabella realized that whatever came next had the power to change everything. Isabella's brows furrowed, her lips pressing together as she repeated the question with cautious disbelief. "What condition?" Ethan did not flinch. His gaze remained steady, calm but unyielding, as though he had been waiting for this moment far longer than she realized. "For that 1 hour," he said quietly, "while I stand beside your son, you will let him see me as someone worthy of respect. No lies, no disguises, and no attempts to hide your embarrassment. He deserves honesty, and he deserves dignity." The words cut through her like a blade. Isabella, who was so used to orchestrating every detail of her life, found herself stunned into silence. People rarely spoke to her this way, let alone someone in Ethan's position. She was accustomed to deference, to obedience, to those around her bending under the weight of her authority. Yet here was a man with a mop and calloused hands, standing firmly before her as if he were her equal, or worse, her judge. For a long moment, the marble lobby echoed only with the distant hum of the city outside. Isabella's chest rose and fell, each breath shallow, her pride and desperation at war within her. She wanted to reject his demand, to remind him of his place. But the memory of her son's eager eyes stopped her. She could not allow Oliver's fragile hope to be crushed. Slowly, she gave the smallest nod, though her voice betrayed her unease. "Very well. You have my word." Later that night, the school auditorium buzzed with chatter. Bright banners hung from the walls, painted airplanes and stars decorating the space where children and parents gathered for the evening's event. Laughter and music filled the air, but amidst it all, one little boy sat at the edge of the stage, swinging his legs impatiently. Oliver's face lit up the moment he saw Ethan walk in. The janitor, dressed neatly though plainly, held the boy's hand in his own, the gesture simple yet filled with warmth. Oliver's eyes sparkled with pride, as though the whole room had shifted around him. "Dad!" he exclaimed, tugging Ethan closer. The word nearly stopped Isabella's heart, but Ethan only smiled, his grip firm, his voice gentle. "I'm here, champ." Together they moved through the crowd. Ethan crouched down to join Oliver in games, his tall frame folding easily so he could meet the boy eye to eye. When Oliver entered the paper airplane contest, Ethan guided his small hands carefully, showing him how to fold the corners just right. Their laughter blended together when the airplane soared further than the others, Oliver's triumphant grin making Isabella's throat tighten. For the first time in years, she saw her son laugh freely, not guarded, not hesitant, just pure, unfiltered joy. She stood at the edge of the room, watching. Something inside her cracked as she realized this janitor had done in mere minutes what she had struggled to achieve for years. Give her son a reason to feel proud. For that brief moment, her world felt softer, as though the sharp edges of her carefully constructed life had dulled. But not everyone saw the same thing. Whispers began rippling through the crowd, subtle at first, then louder, growing with every passing second. Parents exchanged glances, some raising their brows, others leaning in close to mutter behind their hands. Ethan noticed the stares but refused to waver. He crouched lower when older kids teased Oliver, shielding him with an easy strength that silenced the laughter. "Don't listen to them," he whispered to the boy. "You're better than their words." Oliver's small arms wrapped around him in a hug that was both fierce and grateful. Still, the murmurs did not die down. They spread like wildfire, threading their way through every corner of the auditorium until the air itself seemed heavy with judgment. Isabella felt her chest tighten, her pulse quickening as she caught fragments of their words. Mockery disguised as curiosity, pity dressed as gossip. And then it happened. A voice, clear and cutting, rose above the murmurs, slicing the room into silence. "Wait a second." The words hung in the air, heavy with recognition. "Isn't that the janitor from Carter Industries?" Every head turned. Every whisper stopped. The spotlight of humiliation bore down with unrelenting force. Isabella's breath caught in her throat, and Ethan, standing tall beside Oliver, clenched his jaw as the weight of the moment pressed hard against them. And just as the hush deepened, Isabella realized the next few seconds would decide everything. The air inside the auditorium thickened, pressing down on Isabella until she could barely breathe. Dozens of eyes turned toward her, their judgment sharper than any blade. The words "janitor" from Carter Industries clung to the walls, echoing, whispering, multiplying, until it felt as though the entire world knew her secret shame. Parents shifted in their seats, some smirking, others leaning closer to whisper, their voices dripping with ridicule. A few offered looks of false sympathy, the kind that was worse than mockery, for it carried smug satisfaction, proof that even a CEO could stumble. But Ethan did not waver. He stood tall beside Oliver, his jaw tight, his shoulders squared. If the stares burned into him, he gave no sign. Instead, he bent down, lowering himself to the boy's level, and placed a hand gently on Oliver's shoulder. His voice was steady, soft enough to be just for him. "It doesn't matter what they say. What matters is who you are." Oliver's wide eyes filled with uncertainty, but the firmness in Ethan's tone seemed to anchor him. The little boy wrapped his arms tightly around Ethan's neck, clinging to him as though he were a lifeline in a storm. "Will you come to more things like this, Dad?" The words slipped out naturally, innocently, carrying a weight far heavier than the boy could possibly understand. The sound of it sent a shock through Isabella's chest, a painful tightening that made her throat ache. She wanted to step forward, to correct her son, to untangle the dangerous lie before it rooted itself any deeper. But before she could open her mouth, Ethan gave a calm, almost imperceptible nod, the kind that told her not to interfere. His quiet acceptance spoke volumes, and in that instant, Isabella felt both anger and gratitude swelling within her. The event continued in a haze. Isabella stood rigidly at the side of the room, her ears still ringing with whispers, her face carefully composed, even as her insides churned. She had built her life around image, reputation, the unshakable facade of control. Tonight, in a single hour, it was unraveling. Yet she couldn't ignore the sight of her son, Oliver's face glowing with joy, his laughter unrestrained, his small hand never leaving Ethan's. When it was finally over, they stepped out into the cool night air. The parking lot was nearly empty, rows of cars gleaming faintly under the streetlights. Isabella's heels clicked sharply against the pavement, each step punctuated with the storm brewing inside her. As soon as they reached her car, she turned, her voice snapping through the silence. "Do you realize what you've done? Everyone in that room thinks I hired a janitor to play father to my son." Ethan did not flinch. He met her fury with quiet steadiness, his eyes unwavering. "Maybe," he said, his voice calm but firm. "They should think less about status and more about what a child needs." The simplicity of his words stung more than any accusation. Isabella wanted to retort, to slice through his dignity with a reminder of the gulf between them. But the conviction in his tone silenced her. His gaze held no shame, no apology, only truth. And that truth terrified her more than the gossip of every parent combined. Before she could summon her next words, a sharp vibration in her purse interrupted her thoughts. Her phone buzzed insistently, the glow of the screen lighting up the darkness. Isabella glanced down, irritation flashing, until she saw the name. Her late husband's lawyer. Her breath caught, her fingers trembling as she unlocked the message. The subject line glared back at her, bold and merciless. Regarding the hidden truth about Oliver's biological father, her knees weakened. For a second, the world around her seemed to tilt, the ground no longer solid. She gripped the side of the car door to steady herself, her pulse racing in her ears. The whispering parents, the humiliation in the auditorium, all of it faded beneath the weight of those words. Hidden truth. Biological father. Ethan noticed the sudden pallor in her face, the way her hand clutched the phone as though it might shatter in her grip. "Isabella?" he asked quietly, stepping closer. "What is it?" She could barely speak. Her lips parted, her throat dry, her heart hammering with a fear she hadn't felt in years. The phone screen burned in her palm, daring her to open it, daring her to face what she had buried for so long. And as the night wind swept through the empty lot, Isabella realized that whatever waited inside that message would not just shake her. It could destroy everything she thought she knew about her son, her marriage, and herself. Isabella's breath came shallow as her thumb hovered over the glowing screen. The silence of the parking lot pressed in on her, broken only by the distant hum of the city. With trembling hand, she finally tapped the message open, and the world seemed to tilt on its axis. Words spilled across the screen like daggers. Legal documents, paternity test results, confidential notes from her late husband's lawyer. Every sentence shattered another piece of the life she had clung to for so long. The man everyone had believed to be Oliver's father, the man she herself had let Oliver worship in stories and photographs, was not biologically connected to him at all. Her knees threatened to give way. She clutched the phone tighter, as if holding it hard enough might change the truth it revealed. Buried records, hidden contracts, the silent betrayal of paperwork that had waited in the shadows for years, now standing before her in black and white. Ethan, standing only a step away, noticed her face drain of color. His voice was gentle, careful, as though afraid that a single wrong word might break her completely. "Isabella, what is it?" She swallowed hard, her voice cracking as she forced the confession out. "Everything I've told the world, everything I've told my son, it's not real. Oliver doesn't even know who his father truly was." The words tasted bitter, like poison she had been swallowing in silence for years. Ethan studied her, his expression unreadable for a moment, before he reached out and placed a steady hand on her shoulder. The warmth of his touch startled her, grounding her in the storm that threatened to consume her. "Then maybe," he said softly, "it's time to stop hiding. Maybe it's time Oliver finally gets the honesty and the love he deserves." Her lips trembled, tears brimming at the corners of her eyes. "And you think you can be part of that?" she whispered, her voice laced with both doubt and desperation. His reply came without hesitation, quiet but firm, as if the truth had already been living inside him. "I don't just think, Isabella. I want to be, if you'll let me." Her heart stuttered at his words. For a moment, she saw something in Ethan's eyes that she hadn't seen in anyone's for years. Sincerity. No ulterior motive, no hunger for power, no desire to use her weakness against her. Just a man, willing to step into the storm with her. Before she could respond, the sound of small, hurried footsteps broke the fragile moment. Oliver came running across the lot, his face glowing with excitement. In his hands, he held the paper airplane Ethan had folded for him earlier. "Mom! Dad! Look! It flies perfectly now!" he cheered, his laughter echoing into the night. The word "Dad" hung in the air again, heavier this time, cutting straight into Isabella's chest. She glanced at Ethan, who didn't flinch at the name, only smiled faintly at Oliver's joy. Her son's innocence, his unshakable belief, made the weight of her secret almost unbearable. But before she could gather her thoughts, the low purr of an engine rolled into the lot. Headlights sliced through the night, blinding for a moment as a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. The polished vehicle glistened under the street lamps, its presence sharp, commanding, and completely out of place. Oliver froze mid-laugh, clutching his plane tighter. Isabella's stomach dropped. A knot of dread coiled in her chest, because she recognized that car. She had prayed never to see it again, had buried the possibility of this night deep in the back of her mind. The rear door opened slowly, deliberately, and a man stepped out with a confidence that sent chills down her spine. His silhouette was sharp against the glow of the headlights, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with a calm authority that made the air itself seem heavier. Isabella's breath caught in her throat. Her world, already fractured by the message on her phone, threatened to shatter completely, because the man standing before her was someone she never thought she'd see again. Someone who carried with him not only the truth she had tried to bury, but also the power to unravel everything in her carefully built life. E-Man stepped fully into the glow of the streetlights, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement with a deliberate rhythm. Isabella's breath caught as his face came into focus. Marcus Hale, a name from her past that still had the power to twist her stomach into knots. He hadn't changed much, still tall, still handsome in that sharp, carefully calculated way, his suit tailored to perfection, his confidence dripping from every movement. Only now, his smile was colder, sharper, a weapon rather than a charm. Isabella, Marcus said smoothly, his eyes flicking briefly to Ethan before settling back on her. It's been far too long, and yet it seems your life has taken a rather interesting turn. Oliver gripped Ethan's hand tighter, sensing the unease in his mother's face. Ethan instinctively drew the boy a little closer to his side, his protective stance firm, unspoken, but clear. Marcus's gaze finally landed on the child. His smirk widened, though his tone carried an edge of mockery. So this is the boy, your son, and this, his chin jerked toward Ethan, is your idea of a father figure? A janitor pretending at respectability? The words hung in the air, slicing through the fragile peace of the night. Isabella flinched, but Ethan didn't move, didn't break eye contact with Marcus. Oliver, however, lifted his chin. His young voice trembled, but carried courage that made Isabella's heart ache. He's not pretending. He's my dad. Marcus laughed, the sound bitter. Your dad? Child, you have no idea what that word means. A father gives you wealth, legacy, protection, the finest name to carry forward. Not a man who scrubs floors. His tone dripped with disdain, each word like a lash meant to sting. But instead of fear, Ethan only stood taller, silently wrapping an arm around Oliver's shoulders. The boy clung tighter to him, burying his face into Ethan's chest for a moment before whispering, barely loud enough for Isabella to hear, "Mom, I don't want legacy. I just want him." The simple words shattered something inside her. Years of lies, of facades, of hiding behind the glossy surface of power and reputation, none of it mattered anymore. Not when her son's heart spoke so plainly. She felt tears sting her eyes, but this time they weren't born of shame. They were clarity, truth breaking through the chains she had wrapped herself in for far too long. She straightened, facing Marcus with a strength she hadn't realized still lived inside her. "You're wrong," Isabella said firmly, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "My son doesn't need a legacy. He doesn't need a fortune or a famous name. What he needs is love. What he needs is presence. What he needs," her hand brushed gently across Oliver's hair, "is a father." And tonight, he found one. Marcus's smirk faltered. For the first time, a crack appeared in his polished mask, his jaw tightening at her defiance. The silence between them stretched taut, heavy with finality. He gave Ethan one last look, sharp with disdain, but tinged with something that almost looked like defeat. Then, without another word, he turned sharply on his heel and stormed back toward his sleek black car. The door slammed shut with a finality that echoed like a closing chapter. Moments later, the vehicle roared to life and disappeared into the night. The lot fell quiet once more. Isabella's body trembled, the adrenaline of confrontation still coursing through her veins, and yet for the first time in years, her heart felt lighter. Her gaze drifted toward Ethan, who still had his arm protectively around Oliver. Slowly, tentatively, her hand reached out, brushing against his. The touch was small, hesitant, but it was a choice, her choice. Ethan glanced down at her, surprise flickering across his features before softening into something deeper. His voice was low, almost hesitant. "So, am I still just a janitor to you?" The question pierced her heart, carrying both the weight of his doubt and the vulnerability he had had never dared show before. Her throat tightened, but she shook her head firmly, tears slipping free. "No, Ethan. You're not just a janitor. You're the man who gave my son a father when he needed it. Most, and the man who showed me what love truly means." Ethan's expression softened, his eyes glistening in the dim light. For a moment no words were needed. Oliver nestled safely between them, holding his mother's hand with one side and Ethan's with the other. His paper airplane, slightly crumpled from the evening's adventures, was still clutched tightly in his grasp, and as they stood there in the quiet night, three souls bound not by legacy, wealth, or bloodlines, but by choice and love, Isabella realized she had finally found what she had been searching for all along, a family.